Our first play who is rostered into the double digits of any leagues, but needs to be added in all leagues right now, is Hunter Renfrow. Showing up on rosters at just an 11% clip in Yahoo leagues, that will change in the aftermath of his 5 catches, 77 yards, and a touchdown performance Sunday in an overtime win versus the Dolphins. He's unquestionably the slot receiver, and with defenses keying in on Darren Waller, he's the beneficiary of a lot of open looks in the center of the field. Do we expect massive outbursts like in week 3 every time out from him? Of course not, but he only saw the field on 50% of offensive plays in the first 2 weeks of the season and still put up production. But there's an obvious rapport between...
Cool. That is something I think needs to be fixed.
It's a fine line. I totally get it, though.
I'm not saying don't hype something if you don't really like it.
Yeah.
But if you hold 5% of all of them and you're like, check this out, you know.
That's where it gets
dicey.
Dangerous.
All right, welcome in the Awesemo Fantasy Football Show on the Awesemo Fantasy Football channel. We appreciate you hanging with us as we look at everything that happened, some things that went right, wrong over the weekend. Still one more game before the week wraps up, but we always are looking ahead at some buy lows, sell highs. The waiver wire is always going to be an impact here. And, of course, some injuries as well. Rasa's in the house, Lofty's in the house, Chris is producing. Gentlemen, let's get right to it. We had a busy weekend on Sunday, to say the least. And I know there were some ups and downs, just a wild weekend, I think, as a whole across the slate. But so far, so good. You both survived Sunday, to say the least, Lofty.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I didn't survive the main slate so much as, well, I don't know why. I don't know. I was about to talk DFS here for a second. I'm just, that
was where the positive was.
I have one dynasty league, though. I have a bunch of dynasty leagues, but I have one dynasty league where I have McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook. I think I've told you guys about this. Derrick Henry,
yep.
Cam Akers. It's just loaded, right? DeAndre Hopkins, Julio Jones, Antonio Brown. Some of the guys are getting a little bit up there in age, but I have a few years left where I can just crush. But lost McCaffrey, lost Dalvin Cook to the week, lost Antonio Brown to the week, had Darius Slayton. You have to play 13 players in this league every week, which, by the way, if you guys play dynasty leagues, I highly recommend this format. It's so much better than having an amazing team that you've built up over the years and you can only start 8 players each week. So talk to people in your league. Talk about starting that. Ben, I see you nodding your head. It's nice, right? You play 2 people every week too, but having that ability to actually utilize all the players when you've made good moves just seems to make more sense in dynasty leagues.
Yeah, I feel like dynasty leagues is more about uncovering depth and diamonds in the rough. In some of these leagues, it's like, oh, great, now your bench is more viable, but you never get paid off. Like it should be more of a whole roster type deal. I'm with you.
Look, if that was the positivity for you, that helps block out whatever happened on the DFS slate.
No, DFS went well. That's what I was going to say.
It was last minute for you.
Main slate went poorly, and then
got it.
Raked in the showdown slate because of Kyle Juszczyk. So no, we're all right, man. And I'm going to win this dynasty league, both matchups. I think as long as Zeke doesn't go for 18, we're good. I'll win them both. I'll go to 6-0, highest score in the league. We're in business, man. Everything's okay. Got some injuries.
That sounds good.
Got to live with it.
Look, man, good to hear. You know, I'm like 100 points up here in the Awesemo C League, about to go 3-0. Okay. Surprising a lot of people. They've heard me talk on this channel and on this network that we have and probably thought, oh, he's an easy mark. I could easily, knock him off in our league. And here I am at a 3-0 start.
Moving to the big league.
Even a blind squirrel,
That's right. I'm still in the A league somehow. So anything can happen.
You guys are the analysts. You're the sharps here. I'm just along for the ride. So there's a big difference, right? Look, I just don't want to get relegated, Ben. That's the only thing I fear is relegated into the D League.
Is there a D League?
I was going to say, I don't think we have that. So you should be safe.
It'll just be Eytan. You'll have a great team.
Yes.
Yeah. Times are tough.
Yeah.
I'll be one of those.
In all seriousness, though.
Yes.
If you look at this week, right? If you look at the league over the past 3 weeks, right? We got one game to close out tonight. Eagles, Cowboys at the Jerry Dome. Home opener for the Cowboys. By the way, if you guys do like DFS and you like showdowns, and you're trying to lick those wounds after some bad losses in week 3, our DFS channel is where we got this all started. I mean, we got almost 60,000 subs over there. That's where we've been churning content out for years now. Every single day of the week, we got the Showdown Strategy Show for DraftKings, FanDuel, Yahoo, the Deeper Dive, Live Before Lock coming up all the way till kickoff. So if you guys are into that type of stuff, come join us over there. We do it every single week for every single slate, not just football, but everything else. Anyway, what I was going to say is, you look at the 3 weeks that we've got now. Baltimore loses to the Raiders, right? And then I'm just using one example. They come in, they beat Kansas City. And then they almost lose. They should have lost to the Lions if they didn't have the greatest kicker ever, because he is. Justin Tucker's the greatest kicker ever. 66-yard field goal. He skipped 65, which would have been a record. Went to 66. The Chiefs are 1-2. They're last in their division. The Packers got smoked by the Saints in week 1 and then routed Detroit towards the end and looked great against the San Francisco 49ers. These are just some examples of teams I'm giving you. We know what teams are bad. The Jets suck. The Jags aren't very good, although Agnew had that great 109-yard kickoff or missed field goal return. I could go down the list. But it's so tough outside of the Rams and a couple other teams, this gray area, to know who's actually good right now, man. What a weird start to the year.
I feel like that always, I don't know. The NFL, we talked about that. Listen, I was pretty close to betting the Lions money line. And if I did, I don't know if I could have survived. The teams just at home, they are much more competitive. You know, any team in the NFL can honestly beat any other team almost on any given week. It's not like college where the discrepancy in talent is so vast that you can't have it. So we're going to see. For me, on the fantasy side, actually went pretty good, but I was set up really well because Thursday went great. I had DJ Moore and Cooks. When Christian McCaffrey goes down, certainly DJ Moore, even before that, was absolutely on fire, and he's going to be really tasked to keep it going for Carolina in his absence.
Shout out to Nick Lepre in the chat here, our own notorious FNTSY, who's down 0-3 in the C League. So maybe there is some fear of relegation for somebody. I'm just thankful that it ain't me. Sorry, Nick. All right. Let's look at the week now that we had. You mentioned McCaffrey injury, some others that we'll look at, right? AJ Brown, James White, basically the Giants receiving core. Lofty, you want to start? We can look at, now that the ripple effect, as Rasa brought up, of Christian McCaffrey has been handled. We still have, let's look at AJ Brown first. We'll kind of bounce around. Definitely James White had a big impact on Sunday, and the Giants, which I know killed a lot of people, Rasa, who took the Giants -3, multiple people going down in that game.
Yeah. I mean, where do we begin? It wasn't, there wasn't these headline big time things, but yeah, the Giants receiving core dismantled. You mentioned James White, and that's going to have direct impact on some of these other guys that we're going to talk about. It's going to solidify some usage for teams, and it may change the way they play. So, it was an interesting week in that regard. Honestly, I don't know what the headline would be. It wasn't like we've had the dramatic, you guys talked about McCaffrey already on the Friday show.
Right.
And other than that, Dalvin Cook sat. I don't think that's a long-term thing. Just going to be seeing how some of these teams kind of delegate now. Someone like James White goes down. I don't know if that means Harris will be more busy in the passing game. Seems unlikely. But for the Patriots, those are the type of players they really can't afford to lose at this stage.
No, you can't. And when you lose a guy like James White, when you don't have a guy like Cam Newton at quarterback, and don't get me wrong, I'm happy that Cam Newton's not there just for the sake of, guys like Damian Harris and James White. When you lose someone like that, it makes your offense very vanilla, because now you've got a rookie quarterback, and my God, have rookie quarterbacks struggled this year. It's been a sight to behold, right? I mean, it is awful. Mac Jones hasn't been terrible, but he certainly hasn't been shouldering the load for that New England offense. Matter of fact, James White was doing a lot of heavy lifting.
Yeah.
But what I see here is a couple of interesting factors. One, Damian Harris, if you have Damian Harris, we were already kind of happy to see that he was getting a little bit of pass catching work, right? In week 1, he saw 3 targets, then 1, then 2. Is it possible that he sees a few more? Maybe, but I'm going to go ahead and say he probably won't. So I wouldn't be looking towards him as a guy that I'm, targeting now, because I think he's going to get more opportunity in the passing game. That to me doesn't seem to be feasible. Now, Ben, I want to ask you about this, and I definitely want to hit on AJ Brown as well. But if you're looking at, say, this backfield, right? The Patriots backfield. Is there anyone here that can kind of shoulder that pass catching load with James White gone, who was carted off the field? Because if so, then maybe like JJ Taylor. Because if that's the case, then he could take a decent enough role in the offense to be a flyer in really deep leagues.
He definitely could. I just worry that it may be more of a, almost like a, we talk about running back by committee. It's usually on the ground. It might be pass catching running backs by committee with them, with like Bolden getting involved.
Could be.
Maybe Harris takes a slight uptick, JJ Taylor, and nobody really directly, solidifies a new role, just because James White was an integral part of that team. I'd be hard pressed to think that they're going to just slide any player into his complete role and think that that's going to work.
He did
think about it.
2 targets yesterday, though.
Yeah.
Well, I think one thing to look at from the volume here is that I don't necessarily assume that White represents running back volume. He represents pass volume, right? So what about Jacoby Myers? What about other receivers now, where it's more a matter of still throwing the football, but somebody outside of that position gaining higher traction as a result of James White taking away targets from a receiver so much as another running back?
I think it's possible. Sure. I don't know if it's probable. So let me tell you why. Now, Ben mentioned Bolden, which I think you might be right, Ben. Maybe it is Bolden, right? Because he played 33 snaps last game.
Yeah.
And had 4 targets. So, all right, here's what I mean, Eytan.
Yep.
The first 2 weeks of the season, James White actually had a rushing touchdown, but he had 7 and 6 targets respectively against Miami and the New York Jets. Then he had 1 target in week 3, only played 6 snaps before getting hurt. Brandon Bolden played 33 snaps. He had a target, right? So that's 1, right? Or he had 4 targets. Taylor played 10 snaps. He had 2 targets. And then Damian Harris, who has been getting 1 or 2 targets a week, had 1 target. So ultimately, that volume that White was seeing in the first 2 weeks was actually made up for by those 2 guys. And there was no time to prepare for it. So now that I look at it, Ben might actually be spot on with this, that it's Bolden and Taylor, and they each play like 25 snaps, or maybe Bolden plays more, but Taylor comes in on passing downs and gets 3 targets or so. And that's what you get.
That's exactly how I kind of envision it. And
I think
at
right.
the end of the day, New England, they still have, I think, an identity of lean on the running game, lean on the defense. Mac Jones, don't turn the ball over as little as possible. Don't push it unless we have to. So I don't know if it's going to equate to more deep shots, anything like that. I think they're going to try to find a complement of players to take James White's role and not shake up this offense.
Yeah, this week's matchup will definitely be telling, I think, for sure, with a pretty big game, I hear, and a pretty big guy coming back. So we'll see. Also against the team that you can throw against, right? But it's going to be pretty difficult to run. So that can be factoring into it as well, this matchup this week. Let's mention A.J. Brown as we were talking about it with the Titans. Now, clearly, they get the win, but limited, significantly limited. And that hurt a lot of Brown, not owners, pardon me, people that were rostering A.J. Brown. Want to make sure I get that right.
Yeah. So, okay. This is the way I say. I'm sorry. I was trying to look up some stats here.
It was like some big inhale.
So yeah, I was trying to
go on a diatribe.
First of all, next week, they've got a good. Okay, so AJ Brown could have a grade 1 or grade 2 hamstring injury. If it's a 2, it could be 4 to 8 weeks. That's not good. If he's out for 4 to 8 weeks. If it's a 1, and I'm no doctor, I'm literally just reading here. I'm trying to look this up. Then it could be 1 to 2 weeks. But listen to this, man. Their next 2 matchups are the Jets and the Jaguars. All right? The Jets and the Jaguars. So if there was ever a spot to say, oh, man, Julio Jones could go nuclear here, Derrick Henry's already going to get the workload. I'm not worried about that. But then you even have somebody like Nick Westbrook. If he ends up being involved, I don't mind him as a streaming option in deep leagues, assuming A.J. Brown, and A.J. Brown's going to miss next week. Phenomenal matchups. The one concern surely is that Derrick Henry just eats up all of the work, but you can't do that when he's already getting more work than he can handle. So Julio, Westbrook, Rodgers, I think all of these guys are at least worth talking about in these beautiful matchups coming up against the Jets and the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah, I mean, you would assume that they'll be pretty cautious with him considering they don't need him for those matchups anyway. And then it's just weird. It was a weird situation. All those guys that you mentioned, they all scored last week. All the Titans touchdowns came from these type players. So I don't love that in the sense that I do think that their names are going to be a little inflated just off that, but particularly Westbrook, he looks like a guy, that can operate out of the slot, that can do some things, almost like Humphreys at one time did. So I don't mind that. I think that you're going to have ample opportunities. And like you mentioned, Derrick Henry, we keep saying this, and maybe this is one of the themes of the year, Lofty. All these teams, it's like, oh, they're just going to run the ball. That doesn't mean they're not going to throw at all. There will still be volume, even though the game script will probably trend towards keeping on the ground late. Tannehill will still have ample opportunities in the passing game.
I always attribute it to the college. Is it Army?
They didn't. They had 0 passing yards on Saturday.
Right. And people just look at some football teams like that's going to be the case. It's never going to be the case. You might not get Matt Ryan volume, but you're going to get enough volume to where when one of your top 2 guys is out, the other one is probably going to feast or at least see enough volume to be valuable. So I know Julio hasn't been great in 2 of 3 weeks, but you have to love him in week 4. I mean, he's going to be one of my favorite players.
Yeah, they've already shown last year with Derrick Henry being a beast for multiple years that there's plenty of opportunity to throw the football. I mean, Tannehill has been an option even without Julio now to this mix with A.J. Brown, and, they lose a tight end, but still it doesn't matter as far as attempts and as far as what Tannehill is going to be asked to do. So, I'm with you guys. I don't see that there would be any real concern, especially if A.J. Brown misses time and ever the case where it would just be a turn to the heavy rushing element of it. And that's the beauty of Derrick Henry, is that he doesn't need that in order to be that monster that we've seen on the ground. If it's 1 or 2 or 3 big plays on top of the volume to not take away. So anything else, the Giants guys, we should talk about the Giants guys as well. I know Juju left that injury with Pittsburgh as well, which was just a disappointing effort across the board for that offense. My goodness. But the Giants lose a couple of guys, and it wasn't pretty by any means. I think there was a lot of expectation in that game. Offense aplenty. We didn't get it really from either side. The shootout, at least, expected. But Giants have always been, this year at least, these 3 weeks, kind of hit or miss. We're dealing with Daniel Jones and the volatility there. To not have consistency in the receiver position, I imagine is going to hurt him even more outside of his ability to run. But let's look at it, Lofty. Let's look at it from, the side of the receivers first with the Giants and the injury, at least the impact of that.
Yeah, and people aren't necessarily talking about the fact that Kenny Golladay was hobbled coming into this game too with that hip, which has plagued him for a while now, and was potentially going to be limited. Now, I will say this much. Fortunately, he played 48 snaps. That's encouraging. I still think, now, let me be clear.
Of 70, right?
Right. So it's 48 of 70 is not great. Right. The reason it's encouraging.
It's not 48% of the snaps. It's more than that. I just wanted to clarify.
Correct. Yeah, it was 69% of snaps. Now, to be fair, the reason I find it encouraging is because assuming he's fine, and this is just like a maintenance thing, or like they're limiting him so he's good for next week, I would expect that to come up higher, probably 80, 85%, especially with all of these guys potentially missing. These hamstring injuries linger, and Shepard and Slayton both suffered them. They're going to be questionable, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're ruled out like midweek or leading up to like Friday. So I think despite Galladay's lack of production, I'm not sure how you don't look towards him coming up. I mean, who do they face? New
Orleans.
Oh God.
Yeah. Tough scene.
You might, but if you have Golladay and you drafted him in like the 7th round and you don't have a good flex, I might just bite the bullet and go with the volume. Again, think about this. Brandon Cooks is not on a good team. Davis Mills is not good. And that volume, I was having a conversation with Eric Beimfort today on Twitter. I think that's how you pronounce his name, right? And he was talking about Kyle Pitts and how, people were right on fading him, but for the wrong reasons. When he's saying, really, it's just like Arthur Smith isn't as sharp as he acted or we thought he was. And I don't disagree with that, to be honest with you, and a few other reasons. and that Matt Ryan is dust. And I said, you know what? You're probably right. However, he saw 13% target share last week, and then yesterday an 8% target share. That's not good. But if you're Brandon Cooks and you're getting targeted on 50% of passes, I don't care who your quarterback is. Look at Najee Harris. You don't think Ben Roethlisberger's dust? He got 19 targets and 14 receptions, eclipsed 100 yards based solely on volume. So if we're looking at this as a spot where Kenny Golladay could be a volume monster, then you might just have to go ahead and say, all right, I'll do it. I'm not ready to take shots on guys like Kadarius Toney yet, Ben.
No.
Yeah. First of all, the Giants, that was abysmal. They did many things wrong. They punted at one point on the 39-yard line yesterday, just to give you a sense of what we're dealing with. But that's neither here nor there. The thing with Golladay, you could look at it two different ways. One, he's coming from a situation that was pretty dismal, and he still got his more often than not. He's a guy who can make tough catches, doesn't need a lot of separation, but he's also going to receive more inefficient targets. The thing I like about Najee Harris, even though Big Ben is dust, all you got to do is throw it 1 yard to him and let him go. Golladay, it's going to be a lot harder to complete those passes. But the other guy I want to bring up, I mean, you know me, Evan Ingram did come back, and
yes,
he is going to be tasked with having a big part of this passing game until these other guys get back. He had 6 targets yesterday, only a couple of receptions, but I think that Evan Ingram is the other guy that's going to be asked to fill this production, especially because Saquon also is going to be very busy. He had 7 targets yesterday, but you can't run against New Orleans. So particularly next week, you're not going to be able to run Saquon. It's going to have to be those 3 guys in the passing game to help out Daniel Jones.
Colin Johnson saw 7 targets too.
I thought he was on the Jaguars, so that's news to me. But the Giants,
it's a tough matchup, man, all around. On the road, Saints team is clicking. You mentioned how difficult it is to run. I smell a Daniel Jones over rushing prop, but that's about it.
Certainly could be.
They're bad.
That's about it.
A lot worse than I thought.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I think Washington, New York, we'll see about Philadelphia tonight. This division is definitely teetering on that line of could be as shitty as we thought it was, or as seen in the couple of years outside of just a healthy Dallas. But again, looking at some other things happening. A couple of questions on the chat. I know we have the look ahead at buy low, sell highs that we'll hit you with before we get out of here, and a waiver wire look as well. But I saw Chirp 78. Any thoughts on whether Damian Harris or Jamal Williams make the better flex at this point, full PPR? Loff, you want to crack at that?
Not really. I don't know what he means. Like, are we talking about next week, or are we talking about rest of season?
Look at it season wide. Let's look at it like he's talking about on his roster, knowing James White in the backdrop with that injury.
Yeah, I honestly can't answer that. I'd go. I mean, Damian Harris, you would think, right? But
but not next week,
right? Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Because they got Tampa.
Right. That's the thing. So it could be. You can fluctuate. I don't think you're locked into an answer either way. It's just a matter of week to week, or
it's Damian Harris is the better player in terms of if it's a decent game script and they're, either a neutral game script or they're favorites or even close, and Damian Harris. If you're facing Tampa Bay or if you're just expected to get cooked, then I'm good on that. So no, it's really, come back and ask me later in the week when I've looked at actual matchups for Sunday and going forward.
All right, one other one to look at, and this is a long one, so I apologize. G 2011. Should I continue to start David Montgomery now with Fields, who just was a brutal game for him in that offense, at quarterback, or Edmonds or Jonathan Williams from Detroit?
You can take it, Ben. I mean, I'm happy to. It doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to see exactly. It was not good, but we also have to keep in mind Zach Cleveland. They can't protect anybody. That's my biggest concern. I know Fields doesn't help because he's vulturing, but
9 sacks.
Yeah, just
brutal.
David Montgomery's got. It almost feels like a Mixon-esque situation with Cincy last year. Like it's hard to run when you're just getting hit in the backfield like that, and they can just tee off on you. So I do think of the 3 guys, he's still the best player, but you're going to have to look long and hard if you've got matchups, particularly with Arizona. If you think the passing game will get there, we saw Connor vulture a couple of times, and that's going to be a pain point for a guy like Edmonds. But Yeah, that's a reasonable question to ask. I do think in the right spots, Montgomery's still the guy, but it's sadly a lot closer than I thought it would be.
PFF has this Bears line 31st in run blocking.
Oh my goodness.
Who's behind
who's
them?
32?
The Raiders. So
yeah. I
mean,
hate the Raiders.
They take everything into account. You know, they weight the matchups into this and everything as well. But who was it quickly? It was Montgomery and who else?
Montgomery versus Edmonds or Williams on Detroit.
My biggest issue with Edmonds coming into the year, you can check out all of our videos here. I talked about it way too much, was that I assumed that James Conner would be the goal line back. And
he is.
What's that?
And he is.
He has been.
And you had all of the biggest thing was James Conner is washed, right? That was like the thing across the fantasy landscape. And it's like, first of all, maybe, but he was running behind that Pittsburgh line last year. You see how well Najee's doing, right? You see how well anybody that runs behind that line. I don't care how good of a running back you are. If you run behind an awful line, you're probably going, look at Saquon Barkley, man. It's just the way it is. So I would still, I worry about Edmonds. I think, again, positive game script. You can't, if he's saying to start him or should I drop him for one of these guys? If it's a start thing, it's a week to week thing. If it's Edmonds in a projected shootout, then I want Edmonds. But if it's Edmonds against Jacksonville, I don't want Edmonds because he gets vultured at the goal line and he has one career carry at the goal line for his career. It's just, you got to play it week to week.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just how to approach this Bears offense. As we saw it just sputter, and how consistent of a failure it can be versus the matchup. And Rasa hinted at it. Just, you're in Cleveland. It's difficult as is, but then you're also going back and hoping that Matt Nagy can figure this thing out. Like, I'm not writing Justin Fields off. I just don't know if the offense can figure it out in time. That's all.
Well, Nagy's saying he might start Foles next week.
What?
I'm dead serious.
I can't get enough of this circus out there.
Please
do.
It is amazing theater at this point. I mean,
please do.
He said Foles, Fields, and Dalton are all in the conversation.
Oh my God. All right. Well, then let's look at this hypothetically. What does it do for David Montgomery if Nick Foles starts?
None of it makes a difference.
Okay.
No. Even with Robinson, he's going to have to get his on wild, inefficient targets. It's a dysfunctional team. And when you're on a dysfunctional team, nothing's really going to function, obviously. So tough sledding for Chicago. They're a lot worse than I thought, too. Some of these teams are awful.
I'll tell you, though, I'd rather have Dalton for Robinson than Fields.
Oh, yeah.
No doubt.
All right, let's look at this. And this is my fault here. This is what happens when you are doing other things in the morning chat phone call here. Let's start. Before we hit the waiver, I know there were some questions about looking ahead to picking up some guys on the chat as well. The week 3 MVP in the books on Sunday. Lofty, you want to start with us? Kick this off.
Sure. This might not be, the most, it might not have been the biggest performance, but I'm going back to Cooper Kupp because every single week now, this guy has been dominant. 7 for 108 in the score in week 1 on 10 targets, 9 for 163 and 2 touchdowns in week 2 with 11 targets, 9 for 96 and 2 touchdowns in week 3 with 12 targets, double-digit targets, and a touchdown in every week, 96 plus yards in all of them. Whenever you think this guy is going to come back down to earth, it was great to see Higbee get involved. I needed that. But Woods, once again, not much. It was D Jackson. It was Cooper Kupp, man. My MVP of the week is Kupp because he just keeps doing it. My least valuable player, that asshole Marquise Brown.
I knew you were going to say that.
I'm sure you're a phenomenal. Yeah, I'm sure you're a great guy. You know what I mean? I mean that in all sincerity. I don't know you. But from a fantasy standpoint, what an asshole. I mean, the guy dropped 2 would-be touchdowns. Would have made the biggest difference for me. Would have made the biggest difference for me on the main slate. Speaking DFS for a moment, and that was rough. And then he didn't get targeted basically the rest of the game. So Marcus Brown went from what could have been a monster game to 8 fantasy points against the Lions. Unbelievable.
That drop, right? Huge.
You have to be more specific. Yeah, that drop doesn't sum it up.
Sorry. Yes. Go ahead. Either one, to be fair.
Yeah.
It was bad. He was.
Now, I have an easy one, but you go ahead, man.
I'm going to go to Mike Williams. Mike Williams is just fine. You want him? I'm going to go to Jamar Chase.
He's winning games for me every week. He and Cup are the only reason why I keep winning.
I think these are the type of receivers, though, that we're really seeing now. Mike Williams is obviously just an absolute monster. And when you've got Keenan Allen on the other side, it's going to be tough. But Jamar Chase, I just find it hilarious. The drops, all the conversation, and it feels like 10 years ago already. This guy, him and Burrow obviously have a connection from LSU. He's explosive. He's electric. What's there to say? He is going to be a serious problem for a long, long time.
Remember they were saying before the season started that he could be losing snaps to Auden Tate.
Yeah. What happened? Guys, he catches a touchdown in every game forever, apparently. So easy life he's got going.
Yeah, Burrow played well. I know the numbers like passing yards there, but the 3 TDs, overcoming that early pick against that Steelers defense. And that was a shock just to see that coming in, just how poorly Pittsburgh was there at the end. But
we're done.
For me, sorry?
They're done.
Yes.
Yeah, they're caught. Look, I honestly, I don't know if you guys caught this, but it feeds into your point about Najee Harris and the touches he got, especially in the passing game. But the last play of the game where they needed a score, Ben Roethlisberger didn't even go through progressions. He just dumped it right off to Najee Harris and walked off the field. I think that was sabotage. And if that's the case, I would stay the hell away from everybody on Pittsburgh except Harris, because he's the only one that's bulletproof to it. Did you see that? He didn't even look downfield. He just dumped it right to Harris, 3 guys on him, and walked off the field in disgust.
Yeah. I don't think they're very happy right now.
Well, that's something to factor in.
Yeah, that's an understatement.
But why would you draft Najee Harris? Not in fantasy. Why would you ever draft Najee Harris in the first round? Give me one good reason for that.
I mean, he is amazing. I know what you're saying, but Najee Harris.
You know where I'm going to go with this, though.
Of course.
If you had a good offensive line that was already installed into your offense, draft Najee Harris. You're throwing him behind Swiss cheese.
Yeah, you're going to get him killed.
And you're going to get him killed. Drafted him in the first round. I mean, people are going, it's not Najee's fault. That's why would you say don't draft him in the first? I saw it all over Twitter. It's not Najee's fault. No, of course it's not his fault. It's their fault for drafting him onto a team that cannot protect anybody and that he gets 0 yards before contact because he's getting crushed. He's getting murdered before he even touches the ball. So, okay, great. 19 targets, 14 receptions. It's useless. And you could have spent that pick elsewhere. But now by the time you finally rebuilt the line in the offense, Najee's gonna have, it's just, he's going to be, the shelf life of running backs is so short. I don't get it.
You mentioned the yards after contact. Some of that contact comes from him running into the back of his offensive lineman. It's like every other play, right? I mean, he's running into the backs of guys more so than he's getting hit. It's awful situation for him. All right, let's look at the waiver wire here, and kind of on the heels of Hamler going down with Denver, opening up some more opportunity, already losing Jerry Jeudy. So that kind of opens up where you're looking at, Lofty, on the waiver wire this week, heading into week 4. More on the chat. Again, we'll take any questions you have looking ahead on the waiver wire. Make sure you hit that thumbs up button, please. Smash away. And you're subscribed to what we're doing here on the Awesemo Fantasy Football channel. And look at that, what we have here with Yahoo. 2 free months of Awesemo Plus Platinum with your first deposit and paid contest entry. So new to Yahoo, we keep telling you, take advantage of some tournaments there. We run the Awesemo Everyone Wins tournament on Sunday that we tell you about here on the Awesemo Fantasy Football channel. So just take full advantage of what we're doing. All we ask in return is that you smash that thumbs up button and you're subscribed to everything here on the Awesemo Fantasy Football channel and beyond, our DFS and odds channel as well. Well, I'm sure we'll sneak a play in before we get out, as we always do on the show. All right, Lofty, take it away. Waiver wire, week 4, mentioned as far as, sealing the injury talk with Hamler in Denver, the kind of factoring into where you want to take it with week 4 look ahead.
Yeah, oh, and by the way, we had a question in chat from Holden Longacre. What do we do with
A-Rob? Yeah, he had a couple of
I know. I'm only going to answer one. I can't rebuild his team, but says, what do we do with A-Rob? They got the Lions this week. You start A-Rob, and this is going to sound crazy, but you hope that Foles or Dalton is starting. I really think at this point you can't throw Fields to the Wolves like that. And Allen Robinson has notoriously performed really well with bad quarterbacks. So, yeah, you got to play him against the Lions, though. You got to play him against the Lions. Yeah, Chuba Hubbard's obviously the top waiver wire ad. We already know that. If you can get him, you can get him. I'd spend a decent amount of fab, but not too much because I expect Christian McCaffrey to be back relatively soon. But yeah, there was one I actually wanted to talk about that you guys might think makes no sense. But KJ Hamler and Ben, I know you've watched the Broncos and you're a Drew Lock guy, and I still would have loved to have seen him start and just air it out every game. But like you have Cortland Sutton, we love seeing him play great. But then Jerry Jeudy goes down. He's going to still miss another few weeks. And then KJ Hamler, who's playing a large amount of snaps in this offense, who would become the de facto 2 or 3, really 3, I guess, behind Patrick, but it wasn't too far off. He just tore his ACL. He's done for the year. So if you want to look at the players on this team that we've got to choose from now, you have Cortland Sutton, you have Tim Patrick, and then you have guys like Deontay Spencer and Kendall Hilton. If that name sounds familiar to you, right? He was the guy who started against the Saints last year at quarterback. And they got hammered. They got destroyed. So
although he looked almost as good as Taysom Hill did.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, they were so efficient, I thought. And I do believe the weather was really bad. If I remember correctly, it was out in Denver. Anyway, this is simple to me. I think Tim Patrick, who's actually not a bad player. I mean, Tim Patrick's a pretty good receiver. He's how owned in most of these leagues. I would assume you're going to get him in a decent amount. He's 23% rostered on Yahoo. I'm picking Tim Patrick up immediately. I think he's a priority ad for the next several weeks and could be very valuable.
Yeah, I mean, the Broncos, I'll say this too, they've benefited from an extremely easy schedule to start. They're going to have to throw the ball more often when they're in real games. And
they got some tough matchups coming up.
Definitely. It's going to test them a little more. So someone's going to have to step up. I do think Noah Fant on the outside is in for increased production, but someone behind Sutton is going to have to fill that void. So Tim Patrick, a great name. And yeah, even though Drew Lock is not starting, he's still on a 3-0 team here. It just shows quality of the locker room. With the guy. Just a real team player.
A locker room guy. Yep. I'll say this as somebody who was riding that under 41, which was a joke in that game, Jets, and the under Sam Darnold half touchdown prop. I had that game cast on. I was watching and intact on that game. They were still take this for what it's worth. They were crushing the Jets. It was the Jets of all teams, and they were still throwing the football. Bridgewater was still moving the ball in the air, of all people, Bridgewater. So maybe that continues to add to your point, Lofty, that this is not even going to be with an opportunity or maybe an excuse with 2 guys down at that position to focus more on the run game and take it a little bit away from Bridgewater. They were up big against the freaking Jets and still throwing the ball. So even being up, I don't think removes their need or ability to throw the ball. That actually adds even more value, I would think, to Patrick here on the waiver wire.
It could. I mean, like they only threw 25 times, but Bridgewater threw 34 and 36 times against the Jags and the Giants. So yeah, look,
the fact that they were throwing that much against the Jets when they had that game in command.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. That was a game I tried not to watch. I actively tried to avoid that game.
Money to be made.
I also, not to bounce around here, but we got our Chris Cairns just all beat up over the under prop on Teddy Bridgewater. Chris, who produces our show, and basically runs all of the production at Awesemo. So if anything ever goes wrong, just blame Chris.
We should give his Twitter out for that.
What's up? Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I want to ask a question though. And kind of a statement too is why you should be reluctant or at least hesitant or aware of what's going on when you're drafting rookie running backs. Michael Carter's a good example to start, but this Denver situation to me is most interesting because everyone just kind of expected that Javonte Williams would probably be a little bit of a timeshare, maybe real early, and then Javonte Williams would begin to get more work as the season went on. We're actually going in the opposite direction. Now, I think Javonte Williams was good yesterday. He scored, and he had 12 carries, but Melvin Gordon had 18 carries. Melvin Gordon is still being used. And this is, again, what you run into. Could it be a Mark Ingram scenario where he phases out? It could be, but they're 3-0 right now, Ben, with a working recipe, a working formula. They're 3-0. If they go 3-1 or even 4-0 or 4-1, why would you just decide that Melvin Gordon no longer has a role in this offense? I think there's a timeshare leaning actually a little bit towards Melvin Gordon until the season collapses, which it definitely might not.
Yeah, we had talked about that last week as well. You know, some of these guys, like everyone, you know, Javonte Williams' counterpart at UNC on the Jets, he may get some more work as the season goes on because what do they care? They want to showcase him and certainly Wilson and get them experience. But the Broncos are doing what's best to win each and every week because they're in an extremely competitive division right now that looks, I still think the Chiefs are obviously the best team, but right now it looks like a division that could be wrestled from Kansas City, whether it's them or the Chargers. So they're not going to say, okay, we want to start getting Javonte Williams more reps just because of the future. They want the best guys out there. And I think Melvin Gordon is still going to garner a serious workload in this offense.
Feels like it.
All right, Ben, you want to take it here and another waiver wire pickup? I had a couple that I wanted to throw your way. Actually, two guys on the same team, but I'll just leave that lingering as a tease, as I'm sure you are anxious to get to the waiver wire.
Yes, very extremely anxious to get to some of these guys. I mean, it's a situation. I think what we talked about earlier in the show, we got to see how these injuries shake out. And if guys, even though I joked that he felt like he was still on the Jaguars, a guy like Colin Johnson, if you're really in a pinch and these guys are out for a long period of time on the Giants, certainly with the other injuries, we talked about Westbrook for the Titans, they're not going to be long-term solutions for you, but maybe if you're in a pinch for a streamer for a pickup, obviously Chuba Hubbard is a totally different situation. You guys already talked about that, but I think some of these wide receivers for these teams where we did have some injuries and there's just going to be volume to go around. I'm not going to really talk about tight end with like Freiermuth maybe, or someone in that situation. James Washington's another guy. We didn't really talk. The Steelers are garbage, but still it's all about opportunity on the outside and garnering target share. So I think those are the type of guys I wouldn't go crazy with my budget, but if you're in a pinch and you need a guy as a flyer, if the matchup is right, those are names to definitely monitor.
I got to shout and I did this on the betting show earlier with Ben Laffey, but I have to shout our prop tools, NFL betting prop tools on site, because I hammered a couple of unders on James Washington as a result of just following directions on our site. And those were some pretty high returns and hits as well. So definitely take advantage of that if you're betting alongside playing DFS or season-long fantasy football.
And they're free right now.
It's up there free now.
They're free.
Unbelievable. That's money in your pocket that we're giving you, making that free. I have the other guy. So this is like one of those, the guy versus the guy that she tells you not to worry about. I have Devin Singletary, and I'm concerned now, and this kind of falls into the waiver. I know that he's somewhere around 50% or so owned in leagues, so he may not be available everywhere. But what about Zach Moss now as an opportunity to get in, if you can, unowned in leagues?
Zach Moss?
Yes.
I don't know. I'm just... Yeah. What were you going to say, Ben?
Yeah, I was going to say, don't bring any Singletary slander to me and Laffey. You got the wrong crowd here.
Well, I'm just saying, man, I have him. I drafted him. I actively drafted him in our Awesemo league. So don't turn this around on me, Ben.
I know how you operate. No, listen, Zach Moss, he's finding the end zone. I don't know. I mean, Laffey, what do you think? I honestly don't have a strong take. I get it, but I really would be lying if I said I had a strong take.
They were just up by so many points, and I don't know if that's going to be the case.
2 straight weeks.
What?
2 straight weeks, they're up by a lot of points.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, good matchups, bad teams. A receiving touchdown. I don't anticipate seeing much receiving work from Zach Moss. I mean, last year he had one game, 2 games of 3 targets, no games of more than 3 targets. Generally speaking, he had 1 or 0 targets in those games. Here's what I would say. If Zach Moss is on the waiver, you're definitely picking him up. I mean, I don't think there should be leagues where Zach Moss isn't owned, right? And that's about like 46% where he isn't. So I would definitely pick him up, but I don't see, I don't envision myself starting him very often. It's just, unless it's a super deep league, I want somebody that I can actually get some volume out of. And I know, again, yesterday, yes, he had volume, but is that something that we should be expecting going forward? I'm not convinced it is at all.
All right. Anybody else on the waiver wire before we move on to some buy low, sell highs?
I mean, really, you're just looking at how long do you need these guys for? Because with Juju out, you run into a situation where you could be getting a little bit of value there. How much value is really yet to be determined, given how bad this team has been, and they got Green Bay in a 4 p.m. game next week. But if you're very desperate and you're looking towards like a James Robinson who saw 5 targets last game, I'm not necessarily sure who's going to see most of the slot routes. I could pull that up, but yeah, there might be something there. It's just not exciting whatsoever. And I did want to point one last thing out. It's not a waiver wire pick, but Quentin Nelson went down and was carted off in Indianapolis. That's not something that affects guys that, you're picking up off the waiver, but Wentz has already not looked very good. He's already playing on 2 rough ankles. And now you lose some of your best protection. So whether it comes to Jonathan Taylor and Wentz, that does not help an offense on a team that's 0-3 right now.
All right, so let's start off buying low, right? It's buy low, sell high. You can tell that. Let's start there, right? Lofty, you want to kick things off? And We'll kind of bounce around. We'll do our buy lows, and then we'll end with our sell highs.
This might sound crazy, and you think, well, how is this possible? I'd buy low on Christian McCaffrey. And this is what I mean. There are going to be teams out there that just maybe didn't draft well or had some bad breaks that are 0-3 and they're desperate to get a win. And it either comes down to them not being able to play Christian McCaffrey, who they drafted first overall, for maybe because they expect him, Matt Rule expects him back in under 3 weeks, but let's even say he misses 3 weeks, right? They will trade away Christian McCaffrey to get maybe a package deal of 2 serviceable players so they can not have their season over in the first few weeks. Christian McCaffrey is the type of guy, when you lose that production, you're screwed. There's a lot of people out there too that might have him, but are losing matchups. There are good opportunities out there where you could throw you can start fishing for some possible trades and start seeing who's willing to do so. If it's in your league and you don't have McCaffrey, and now people also saying that he's injury prone. So the way I look at it is, I don't think he's injury prone. All of his injuries have been in different spots. I don't buy into that shit unless it's like your knee. Jamal Charles keeps hurting his knee, or Ty Gurley. If I can get Christian McCaffrey cheap and then just not play him for 2 weeks and I'm in a decent spot, that's the type of way to win a league right there. I mean, Christian McCaffrey can win your league if he comes back healthy. He is the best fantasy running back in the league, hands down, when he's on the field and healthy.
Yeah, I don't think that's crazy at all.
No, not at all.
You want to go? You want me to go?
No, I always clean things up at the end. Like, I'm the transition guy.
I didn't know
People are coming here for you.
Jump in with your hot takes.
No, I was just agreeing with Lofty that he's not crazy, that he's not a maniac with that one play.
Fair enough. No, I think a lot of the guys we're going to mention on both sides, I'm going to already preface, we didn't get to sell high yet. Like, let's not get it twisted when I name my guy for that. Like, what? This guy's amazing. Yes, but that's why I'm selling high. And buying low here for me is Stephon Diggs, who, through no fault of his own, you guys already mentioned this, they beat Miami by 35 points. They beat Washington by 22 points. And Diggs has had, through 3 games, a monster. He's got 31 targets. He only has 1 touchdown, and he just had pretty pedestrian games. So again, I don't think you need to overhaul it, but a same situation, there are going to be people out there that are maybe, saying, man, this guy, he hasn't exploded yet. There's other big time receivers that are catching touchdowns every game. Don't panic. Diggs and the Bills, they look too good right now. And Emmanuel Sanders and these guys can contribute, but let's not get it. In competitive big time games, Stephon Diggs' target share is going to be there and his output is going to be there. He is someone, it wasn't the best start to the season, but I expect some absolutely huge performances. And I'll translate this into DFS as well. DFS, he hasn't been a name that's been, mentioned a ton on our Sunday show each and every week. Diggs is going to be buying low for me in a lot of lineups going forward.
Yeah. He had a 29% target share last year. It's at 25% this year. But once you're locked into more competitive games, Diggs is 100% going to be the guy that Josh Allen is looking to. It won't be, 30% target share for Emmanuel Sanders. It's just not going to happen.
Let me slide a name in that you just mentioned as far as being cautious down the road, Lofty, especially because of the injury to Nelson. I just don't see a departure as much as Nyheim Hines could be worked in here, a departure from Taylor really at all. Even with Carson Wentz coming back, we know that's a significant upgrade to the other two guys. And not having Nelson for however long it may be, the volume is going to be there. It's been a really disappointing start, I know, for Jonathan Taylor, but I don't think that it's a matter of giving up on him with a lot of season left. Outside of injury, I don't see that his touches would slow down the line. So I would take advantage. And look, you're getting him rock bottom right now on an offense that has a banged up quarterback, missing arguably the best interior lineman in the game. So I understand that a lot of these circumstances would factor in, but that's why you're getting him low and not high. So I would take a risk if you can on Taylor without giving up a ton, knowing that the volume is still going to be there, even though this team could be dog shit for the next couple of weeks.
I don't have an issue with it. I might even wait a couple of weeks because after we knew their first several games are going to be really tough. But once you get past the Ravens 2 weeks from now, you got the Texans at home, then the Niners. That's a tough one. But then you have the Titans at home. They're not that formidable of a defense. Then you got the Jets at home. Then you got the Jaguars at home. So, that's a really good spot. And then honestly, I may even consider selling him again after that because
at
you got the
point.
Bills,
Yep.
the Bucks,
Yeah.
Texans is easy, but then Patriots, it's Cardinals. It gets ugly towards the back end. But yeah, there's a stretch in there where Taylor's got some really good matchups. I might try to exploit that.
All right, Lofty, bring us back around now on the snake here, selling low or selling high, pardon me.
I'll always sell high on Tyler Lockett. And you guys who have watched the channel
Yes.
and have watched my shows and videos this year
Yes.
know that. I mean, Tyler Lockett is a spectacular wide receiver, but the offense is not built to give him these type of insane week 1 and week 2 games every year. Like, last year, right? He had a 10 for 79 in week 2 and then 11 for 154 and a score in week 3. And then basically disappeared for 5 weeks after that. He had, 3 games last year where he was the number 1 receiver in the league for the week. And then he had 11 games where he was outside of the top 20 at his position. So that to me is concerning. And we saw week 1 and week 2, he was phenomenal, but he did so on 5 targets in week 1 and scored twice. And then week 2, he was just targeted very heavily. There's nothing to take away from that. He will have those games. But yesterday, 4 targets, 4 receptions, 31 yards. You're going to have a lot of those type of games when it comes to him. So best ball, love it. Season long, you're just going to have to grin and bear it in those weeks where Tyler Lockett, and he will go on stretches of that where Tyler Lockett just doesn't show up and hurts you. So if I can sell him at his highest value, I'll always do that and try and bring back someone that's consistent on a weekly basis, but also has the ceiling.
Mine's going to be, I'm not going to say controversial, but this guy is unbelievable. And it's not that I think he's not going to have a very good season. Nobody's this good, though. It's Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp is playing out of his mind. He's got 5 touchdowns in 3 games. He's got 33 targets in 3 games. The Rams offense is very prolific, and he's going to be a part of it. But I don't think that he's just going to be 1A and then Woods and these other guys are going to be a pure afterthought. And it's a situation, I think if you have Cooper Kupp, I'm not saying go look to sell him. I'm saying that if you have a massive need and you say, okay, my team isn't functioning, you may not, this is as high as his stock, I think, is going to be. It can't get much higher. So if you are looking to change it up, the value he could generate is going to be massive right now. And it can only regress at this point because he's been that good to start this season.
I see where you're coming from.
I love Cooper Kupp, though.
I do.
I can't get rid of him on my team. That's for sure.
He was in my must draft video this year for guys that you need to draft in the 4. I did every top 8 rounds, and he was a must draft player for me. Granted, Allen Robinson was in the 3rd round, so you win some, you lose some. But what are you going to do? If I'm on a team that's crushing right now, I'm holding on to Cooper Kupp.
Agree.
Right. But if I'm on a spot, again, like it's the same thing with McCaffrey. If you're losing and you have McCaffrey sitting there for 3 weeks, he does you no good. And by that time, you're going to be out of it. If Cooper Kupp is, one of your only decent players right now, and you need to get, you need to add, yeah, you're right. I don't think the value will ever be higher than this. It's all situational though, right, Ben? Like when you're talking about if you're up, if you're down, all of that stuff matters. and you might have, an ace in the hole when it comes to Cooper Kupp, just given how good he's been.
100% agree. All situational. It's just sometimes you have to say, okay, listen, I can get such a haul for this guy right now that it's worth the risk, because the way my team is constructed, I'm not going anywhere. And it's not because of Cooper Kupp, but he could really transform a roster that maybe didn't start off too hot.
So let me throw this name out as we wind down. And again, hit that thumbs up button, please. Make sure you are subscribed to the Awesemo Fantasy Football channel. Take advantage of what we have. 2 free months of Awesemo Plus Platinum. New user, first paid contest entry at Yahoo. You should be playing Yahoo Fantasy, of course, across the board. James, you talk about right now selling to where he may not be as high in the next couple of weeks to the rest of the season. Finally, he shows up, gets productivity out of that game against Arizona. Why not, if you can afford to not, have some area in your running backs to where it's not a dire need, why not take advantage of his value being super high, especially after it being so low for the first 2 weeks?
Yeah. Okay, with me, and I honestly don't know the right move on this, to be honest with you. You could definitely be right. For me, it's like, is Urban Meyer realizing that maybe James Robinson is the guy that he needs to get the ball to? I don't know. But it's not like he played a ton more snaps or anything that he did in the first couple of weeks. It does probably feel like that. Now, I guess the thing would be, at James Robinson, if you drafted him close to the draft, you were probably drafting him in like the 4th or 5th round. So I don't know if you're getting back the draft capital that you spent, but are you going to get back more than if you held on to him for the rest of the season? That's kind of what you have to weigh against each other.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
tough spot. Jury's still out on him and just the Jaguars in general, just because there's so many kind of new parts. Last thing I'll say, it has nothing to do with what we talked about. You shouldn't be able to return field goals that are short. That's a dumb rule. They should get rid of that. No, that's stupid.
I love that rule.
Why?
No. Because it has nothing to do with anything. It's just like, oh,
you should be kicking 58 yarders in the first place with a jelly leg
300-pound lineman. Yeah, that's real impressive.
But that was the risk they took. It's still in play.
No, that's stupid.
You've been watching too much Presbyterian football, I think.
Yeah, they know what's up. Yeah, no.
Oh, that is disappointing that you would find that as a dumb rule.
Seriously. I'm shocked to hear that from you, Ben.
What?
All right. No. We got to get out of here. We're back on Friday. Myself, Laufey, Matt Savoca's in the house. Thanks to Ben Rasa, Laufey, Chris for producing. You out there, just hit that thumbs up button, smash away. Make sure you're subscribed here to the Awesemo Fantasy Football channel at Laufey_D, at JazzRazDFS, and at Shander Show for me. Have a good one and good luck.
Yeah, that was a 68-yard, Ben.
That's just, no, it makes, that's like, why don't teams just swat it?